Welcome, wanderer of the night. You found your way to a place where time softens, where stone remembers, and where stories fall like desert rain. Tonight, we travel far beyond modern noise, beyond glowing screens, to the sands of ancient Egypt. But not to learn history the way books tell it. No, not this time. This is a different kind of journey. This is the whispered history, the kind passed from breath to breath, the kind built into stone not by kings, but by quiet hands, tired eyes, and beating hearts. Let yourself drift as we follow the forgotten builders of the Great Pyramid. Feel their hopes, their sorrows, and the myths that rose with every block they placed dot. So find your calm. Lie back, breathe slowly. Let this story carry you. And if you find peace here, if even a part of you feels lighter, leave us a comment to share your favorite moment. And don't forget to subscribe so you can return whenever sleep feels far away. Because here, history sleeps beside you. Long ago, before cities rose with steel and glass, before the hum of engines and the ticking of clocks, the world moved with the sun and rested with the moon. On the edge of a great river, the Nile, there lay a stretch of land where gold shimmered beneath the sand, and dreams reached for the stars-filled sky. This was Kemet, ancient Egypt dot, and on one particular morning, long before time as we know it began, a boy named Menyu awoke to the soft rustle of linen curtains and the quiet murmur of wind weaving through palm leaves. It was his first day as a water-bearer at the Great Pyramid site, a place whispered about in wonder, across every village for miles. Menyu lived in a modest clay home with his mother, who wove baskets, and his father, who hauled limestone blocks. They were not royalty, but they were proud. Each had a role in something bigger than themselves, something that would one day kiss the sky. The pyramid, still rising with each passing day, stood like a slumbering giant in the desert. Menyu had heard tales from his older brother about the immense ramps of mud brick, the chants of the stonecutters, and the scent of crushed herbs offered to the gods before each shift. He had imagined it all in his dreams, but reality, it was slower. And stranger doubt, when he first arrived, Menyu was met by silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but one that feels full, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Hundreds of workers moved steadily, lifting, chiseling, hauling. No one shouted. They worked like dancers in a quiet ritual, rhythmic, intentional. Each stone laid was not just a block. It was a memory, a promise, a prayer. The overseers were kind but firm. Menyu was taught quickly how to carry water without spilling it, how to wrap his feet to prevent burns, and how to bow his head when the priest passed. They said the pyramid was not only for the king, it was a stairway to Ra, the sun god himself. Some whispered that it would last forever. There were simple joys. Each week, the workers were granted a feast. Bread sweetened with dates, sour beer in clay pots, and music played on flutes and lyres. Menyu learned to dance with the older boys and listen to the elders tell stories. Beneath the stars, one story was about a worker who claimed to have seen the stones move on their own, floating into place with the help of invisible spirits. The others laughed softly, but no one truly denied it. In Egypt, the line between magic and truth was thin like a reed. Menyu grew strong. He learned the names of the stonemasons, the incense makers, the rope weavers. He began to understand that the pyramid was not built by slaves, as later centuries would wrongly believe, but by people who felt purpose, pride, a sense of sacred duty. One old man named Beka became like a grandfather to Menyu. Beka carved hieroglyphs. He had soft eyes and shaky hands, but when he etched prayers into the tomb walls, the whole world seemed to hush. He told Menyu that the gods listened better when you carved slowly. Asterisk, but life in the shadow of greatness is never without sorrow. 1. Summer. The Nile failed to flood properly. Food became scarce and tempers rose. A young worker collapsed while lifting a heavy stone and never woke again. They wrapped his body in linen and placed a carved scarab on his chest, hoping he would wake in the field of reeds, where there is no hunger and no pain. That night, the worksite fell into eerie silence. Even the flutes refused to play. Menyu, only 15, cried for the first time in front of the other men, and they did not laugh. One by one, they told him of their own losses. A sister gone to fever, a father lost in the desert, a wife whose eyes had never opened again after childbirth. The pyramid was rising, yes, but it rose on the shoulders of grief as much as stone. Asterisk in time, myths began to curl like smoke around the site. They said that inside the king's burial chamber, hidden deep within the pyramid's heart, was a chamber where time itself stood still. That once sealed, the king would not sleep but dream eternally, and that those dreams would guide the next rulers like stars in the sky. Others believed the pyramid was not just for the king, but a beacon meant to signal gods from distant stars, that its shape, perfect and precise, echoed the Orion constellation on certain nights, and that some workers, usually alone under the stars, claimed to see lights above the pyramid that danced in colors no dye could mimic. Beka, the old carver, once told Menyu this: the pyramid is not just stone. It is silence given shape, and inside that silence are secrets even we are not meant to know. Asterisk. And so, as the years passed, Menyu grew older. His muscles hardened, but his heart stayed soft. He no longer carried water, but supervised the building of inner chambers. He etched blessings into walls, hoping one day they might be read again. The pyramid neared completion. Its golden capstone caught the sun like fire each morning, and workers began to leave, slowly, one by one, returning to their farms, their families, their forgotten villages. Menyu stayed. One day, in the final year of construction, he stood alone beneath the colossal structure, his shadow long and thin. He whispered, "We built this for a king, but also for ourselves." And the wind answered nothing, but carried his words away, as though tucking them into the stones themselves. Asterisk. The seasons passed like the slow turn of the stars above. The pyramid, once a vast, growing thing, had begun to settle into stillness. Though it still stood incomplete at its highest point, most of the outer limestone casing gleamed bright in the noonday sun, and men now worked more often inside, crafting final passages, sacred alcoves and chambers whose purposes were known only to the high priests. Menyu had grown taller, his once bony frame now strong and broad like the sandstone blocks he once helped lift. He no longer ran up and down the ramps with water pots sloshing at his side. Instead, he wore a dark linen robe and carried a reed tablet, marking daily progress, assigning crews, and checking inventories of copper tools and carved blocks waiting to be set. But even as his responsibilities grew, his eyes still wandered always, scanning the pyramid, always listening, not for orders, not for noise, but for something quieter, deeper, something he had never been able to name. He spent his evenings seated near Beka, the aging scribe, who now worked more slowly than ever. The old man's hands trembled, but his spirit had not dimmed. His stories, told as the sun bled red behind the dunes, became Menyu's favorite part of the day. One evening, Beka traced a symbol on the dusty stone beside them. "It is the Eye of Horus," he said, "not the one painted on tombs. The real one." Menyu leaned in, puzzled. "What's the difference?" "The painted eye watches the dead, but the real one," Beka whispered, "watches the living and listens, especially here." The fire crackled softly between them. Beka didn't explain further. He never did. He knew that the greatest truths, like the heaviest stones, Were best left unmoved. Asterisk among the inner corridors of the pyramid was a small passage only a few knew about. It wasn't on any blueprint or tablet. No one had officially marked it. But every foreman, mason, and apprentice knew it was there, though no two men could quite agree on where exactly it led. Some called it the breath of the gods. Others called it the dreaming vein. Most just avoided it altogether. One quiet evening, Menyu lingered after the others had gone. He lit a small oil lamp and wandered into the heart of the pyramid. The corridors stretched around him like veins of forgotten time, carved from limestone and polished by the passage of hundreds of hands over years. Eventually, he found it. A narrow passage, no taller than his shoulders, cold and silent. He stepped in. The corridor turned and twisted, then opened into a small room, almost perfectly round. At the center sat a block of granite, smooth, untouched. The air was thick still, but not stale. Quiet, but not empty. There were no carvings here, no glyphs, no offerings. Just silence. Menyu sat. He closed his eyes, and he dreamed not of pharaohs or gods, but of stars falling upward, of flames wrapped in sand, of stone that sang. When he awoke, it was still night. The oil in his lamp had not yet burned out. He never spoke of the chamber again. Asterisk. The following month, Beka passed away quietly in his sleep. He was found under a tamarisk tree near the workers' chapel, his carving knife tucked in his hand and a half-finished prayer stone by his side. The workers held a modest ceremony. No golden mask, no feather of mat, but his name was etched carefully into a small offering bowl. One of his apprentices placed it in the workers' tomb alone, shared resting place carved into the desert stone, far from the king's chambers, but facing the same sky. Menyu wept quietly. Beka had once told him, "We build with our hands, but we also build with our hearts, and the pyramid, child, is full of both." That night, Menyu dreamed of the pyramid again, only this time it was finished. And in the dream, it breathed. Asterisk. Years passed. The pyramid stood tall and complete, its golden capstone reflecting sunlight in brilliant rays visible from miles along the Nile. The ramps had been dismantled, the workers' camps cleared. Palm trees had begun to grow where stone once lay. And the final ceremony, the festival of Ascension, was to be held in the presence of the pharaoh himself. People gathered from across Egypt, traders, priests, dancers, boatmen. Offerings of figs, honey cakes, and wine overflowed along the paths. Musicians played flutes and harps, their melodies rising like incense into the sky. Menyu stood quietly at the base of the monument, far from the priests and the crowds. He ran, a hand along the limestone, warm in the afternoon light. He thought of Beka, of his father, of the boy who once spilled water and was scolded kindly by an old stonecutter. The world would remember the pharaoh's name. They would marvel at the angles, the measurements, the shadows cast at equinox. They would write scrolls and stories and argue about how it had all been done. But Menyu, he knew, the pyramid had not only been built with tools, but with joy, with sorrow, with whispered myths and dusty laughter at dusk. And maybe that's what made it sacred. The festival passed, as all things do. Once the music faded and the feast tables were cleared, the pyramid remained unchanging, unmoving, its edges still sharp against the sky, as if time itself dared not touch it. Menyu stayed behind, while the other workers returned to their villages, to their farms, to their families. He remained among the stones, now a keeper of memory. He had no wife, no children, but he had the pyramid. And somehow, that was enough. He tended to the site, in silence, replaced worn offerings, lit oil lamps for the departed, carved small, quiet prayers in the stone, unofficial, and hidden between the grand glyphs of kings and gods. Each morning, he would walk the length of the base, barefoot, listening to the whispers of wind sliding between blocks. It was said that the pyramid had absorbed the breath of every worker who touched it, and on still days, if one listened closely, you could hear the sigh of the ancients. He once thought he heard Beka's voice on the wind, gently teasing him. "You still walk in circles, boy." Menyu smiled. Years passed. One morning, as the desert sun was still low and golden, Menyu found a small boy sitting at the pyramid's shadow. The boy had no shoes, only a reed mat and a sliver of dry bread. He said his name was Henu, and he had run away from the marketplace in Memphis, where he was made to carry wine jars for a cruel merchant. Menyu, now gray and stooped, but still sturdy, took him in. Together they swept the stone paths and chased away scavenger birds. At night, Menyu would tell Henu the old stories, not the ones etched in stone, but the forgotten ones, the ones only the workers had told in hushed tones after the fire had burned low, like the tale of the firebird who flew over the pyramid once a year, trailing sparks that lit the sky in colors no eyes had ever seen, or the secret chamber hidden behind an echo that opened only when the moonlight struck it just so. Hanu would giggle, wide-eyed, not knowing which parts were true, and Menyu, smiling, would say, "All of it is true, if you believe it slow enough." One evening, after many seasons had passed, Henu asked Menyu the question no one had dared ask. "Have you been inside the king's chamber? The real one?" Menyu nodded once. He did not describe it. He simply said, "It is not what you expect. It is smaller than you'd imagine, and quieter than the sky. But when you are inside, you feel as if you've never left." And then he told the boy a secret spoken so slowly and softly, it felt like the stones themselves leaned in to listen. He said that some believed the pyramid was not only a tomb, but a mirror for the soul, that when a person passed through its halls, the pyramid reflected back not who they were, but who they had truly meant to become. The kings feared judgment, he said, so they built something they thought might impress the gods. But the workers, we left behind pieces of our hearts in the stone. That's what they'll remember. As decades rolled by, the pyramid became more than a structure. It became a riddle. Travelers came from across the desert with scrolls and incense, claiming to have dreams sent by Ra himself. Priests wrote that it was not just a tomb, but a map of the heavens, that its angles aligned with the stars, and that within its chambers lay the secrets of creation itself. Others told tales of curses, of those who entered and never returned, of golden masks that could speak, and chambers where time stood still. Some believed the pyramid had been built by giants, or even by gods. They had forgotten Menyu, they had forgotten Beka, they had forgotten the hundreds of hands that hauled the stone, the thousands of prayers whispered under breath, the feet wrapped in linen to carry the weight of dreams. But the pyramid remembered, and Menyu never corrected them. He never told them of the long days under the sun, or the laughter in the shadow of the ramps, or the way Beka hummed when he carved. Let them think it was magic? Perhaps. In a way. It was one morning. Menyu did not rise. He lay beside the base of the pyramid, eyes closed, arms folded, a single flower placed beside him by Henu, now a grown man with lines beginning to form at the corners of his eyes. He buried Menyu beside the workers' chapel, where the first stones had once been blessed. No great ceremony, no golden mask, just a quiet moment of stillness, the way Menyu would have liked it. The wind blew gently across the sand, carrying the scent of myrrh and something older, something eternal. And the pyramid stood, unchanged. But if you listened carefully, you might hear the softest sound, like the turning of a page or the breath of someone falling asleep, because beneath every stone was a story dot, and beneath every story was a soul. Asterisk, as centuries slipped away like grains of sand through an hourglass, the Great Pyramid stood unchanged, an unwavering sentinel on the edge of the desert. Empires rose and fell beyond its shadow. Greeks and Romans walked its base. Christians and Muslims passed through its halls. Caravans trailed across the sands, leaving footprints that time would soon erase. Yet the pyramid endured, its limestone casing long ago stripped by wind and pilgrimage, but its core silent and strong. In the hush of dawn or the cool hush of dusk, travelers still paused, awed by its simple geometry and by the mystery clinging to every joint and seam. Asterisk, one spring, a young Greek scholar named Callias arrived from Alexandria, his heart full of questions. He had read of the pyramid in dusty scrolls, but yearned to see for himself whether its legends held truth. Callias hired guides and set out across the desert. Two Bedouin brothers, whose ancestors had wandered these dunes for as long as any could remember. They led him beneath the eastern face of the pyramid, where wind-carved grooves spoke of centuries without footfalls. Inside, the corridors felt cooler, as if the stone itself breathed. Callias gripped his oil lamp, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. He paused at the entrance to the king's chamber, its grand granite beams still intact. There, in the dust at his feet, lay a single reed tablet, weathered, age darkened, but unmistakably inscribed in a script older than Greek. He knelt and traced the letters. A dedication by Menyu, the water-bearer turned keeper of memories. For those who enter with open hearts, may you find not only stones, but stories. Callias closed his eyes, imagining the youths and elders who had carved those words, the years of sunrise and sunset they had witnessed. He felt as if they had left a door, ajar, an invitation to cross the boundary between past and present. Asterisk, outside, the Bedouin brothers whispered of their own tales. They say at midnight, if you stand on the south face and whisper a wish, the pyramid will glow. They say the spirits of the workers gather in the grand gallery once every new moon, chanting the names of those who carved the stones. Callias listened, torn between skepticism and wonder. That night, under a sky so clear, each star seemed its own world, he tested the tales. He whispered a prayer for knowledge, and felt, just for a heartbeat, a warmth in his chest, as if the stones themselves had answered. He never told the Bedouins. Instead, he left offerings of incense in the mouth of the entrance, a silent thank you to the unnamed hands that had built this monument to eternity. Asterisk, centuries later, in the era of Ptolemies and papyrus scrolls, a merchant's daughter named Isid found her way to the pyramid. Unlike Callias, she came not for scholarship but seeking solace from grief. Her brother had vanished on the Nile, lost to crocodiles or pirates. No one knew which, and her heart ached with unanswered questions. She lit a single torch and entered the king's chamber. The air was still, thick with the breath of ages. In the silence, she wept quietly. Tears fell onto the dusty floor, soaking into cracks where shadows pooled. Then, in the faint glow, she saw them, footprints small, like her own, leading from the entrance toward the sarcophagus. She followed, startled. No one should have been here. No one for decades. At the stone coffin, a message scratched into the lid, just visible in her torchlight. The lost are never gone. They become part of the tale, forever rising in memory. Isid fell to her knees, her tears mingling with hope. For the first time since her brother disappeared, she felt his presence woven into the fabric of the pyramid itself. Asterisk, as Alexandria's libraries crumbled and Rome's marble faded, the true history of the Great Pyramid dissolved into myth. Crusaders believed it a tower to heaven. Sufi mystics whispered of it as the resting place of a hidden prophet. Explorers mapped it in journals, and then lost those journals again to salt and rot. the world began to see the pyramid not as a tomb, nor as a staircase to Ra, but as a puzzle and enigma that dared anyone to solve it. They measured its angles, probed its deepest recesses, and scanned its weight with tools the ancients could never have imagined. Yet each attempt to conquer its mystery only deepened the silence. For every secret uncovered, countless more rippled outward, waiting like seeds in the wind. In our own time, a lone traveler wanders through the desert at dawn. She is neither scholar nor pilgrim, but an artist searching for something she cannot name. She sets up her easel at the pyramid's base, capturing the play of light and shadow. Across each block dot as she paints, she feels a gentle tug and echo of Menyu's invitation, a whisper of Beka's carved eye of Horus. She dares to place her palm against the cool stone and is startled to feel warmth there. As though the heart of the structure still pulses with memory. She dips her brush in ochre and gold, imagining the workers singing in low voices as they hauled the first stones. She paints the carved hieroglyphs, the prayers and stories hidden between the grand tailies, knowing that her canvas may be another chapter in the pyramid's expansive story. Asterisk and so, dear dreamer, as the world spins on, the pyramid remains less a monument of stone and more a mirror of the human soul. It holds our laughter, our tears, our questions, our quiet hopes. And if you listen with more than ears, if you listen with your heart, you can hear it speak. Sleep now, beneath the same sky that watched Menyu and Beka, Callias and Izzet. Let the whispers of time wrap you in calm. Good night, and may your dreams build wonders of your own. Asterisk. There is a moment just before sunrise when the desert holds its breath. The stars are still awake, but the wind begins to shift. The sky lightens just slightly, and the sand glows faintly as if remembering something ancient. It is in this hush, this breathless stillness, that the pyramid speaks loudest. But not with words. It speaks through warmth, through shadow, through the way the morning light slides across its edges, like a whisper passed between centuries. Asterisk. In the time of caliphs and minarets, when calligraphy danced across parchment like reeds in water, a poet named Samir came to sit at the foot of the great pyramid. He brought no scroll, no scribe, only silence. He had lost his words, not to death or disease, but to doubt. For months, the words he once gathered like dates from a tree had abandoned him, and his inkwell had run dry. But a dream led him here. In it, an old man with gentle eyes, perhaps. Beka, though Samir had never heard his name, handed him a stone with lines etched into it. The oldest stories do not need to be remembered. They are already part of you. Samir awoke before dawn and traveled for weeks to the pyramid. Now he sat cross-legged in the sand, a soft wind stirring his robe, and waited. For hours, nothing came. Then, slowly, a sentence and another. In his mind, but in his breath, in his chest. He reached for his reed pen and wrote in the sand. The stone does not speak. It listens so deeply, you hear yourself. He wrote until the stars returned, then left without a sound. He never returned. But the breeze that day felt somehow different, more poetic, more alive. As if the pyramid had added his thoughts to its collection. As centuries turned into ages, and naps grew crowded with boarders, there were still those who found their way. Back to the pyramid, not for conquest, not for treasure, but for quiet. A young astronomer from India laid at its base one night, charting the stars that hovered above its peak. She noted, with fascination, how the layout echoed constellations her ancestors had named differently, but loved the same. Perhaps, she whispered, the sky above Egypt is the same sky above home. A child from Nubia, wide-eyed and barefoot, once wandered to the pyramid's shadow and sang softly to himself, just to hear how the stone echoed. His voice returned to him deeper, wiser, as if the pyramid sang back. A traveler from the far west. weary and dust-covered, placed his palm against its side and wept not from sadness, but because he finally felt something still and strong enough to lean on. The pyramid offered nothing but silence, but for those who truly listened. That silence was everything asterisk in our world today, of wires and waves, of humming screens and restless hours. The pyramid remains. Tourists arrive with cameras. Scientists arrive with sensors. There are books, documentaries, and debates. Lasers scan its angles. Satellites watch its shadow shift. They ask, how? They ask, why? They ask, what secrets does it hold? But rarely do they ask, what does it remember? Because the pyramid does remember, it remembers the workers, who sang lullabies to themselves under a starry sky. It remembers the cart of bread tipped over by accident, and the shared laughter that followed. It remembers the priest who cried quietly in the corner of a sealed chamber after losing his child. It remembers the first footstep on the first stone, and it remembers you even now, as you lie still, listening, breathing slowly, letting go of the day. Asterisk, and perhaps the greatest truth is this: the pyramid isn't just in Egypt, it is in every quiet moment, every act of patience, every burden carried with care, every dream built stone by ordinary hands. You have your own pyramid. You build it every time you comfort someone, every time you keep going when the path is steep, every time you create something, even if no one sees it. And maybe tonight, as you lie in the hush of your room, letting the story wash over you like desert wind, you'll feel it, your own sacred monument rising within you, calm, unshakable, timeless. Asterisk, they say, on the quietest night of the year, when the wind forgets to move and the stars hang low with ancient weight, the great pyramid breathes, not like a man, not like a beast, but like the desert itself, a long, slow, sacred exhale, as if the earth remembers something it once knew and tries, for just a moment, to speak. There is also the legend of the Chamber of Names, a room that has never been found, but which many believe lies buried deep beneath the pyramid's base. It is said that every name ever spoken during the construction was etched into its walls, not just the names of kings, but of the children who carried baskets, of the mothers who sewed sandals, of the stonebreakers, the herb healers, the song-singers. Names no one ever wrote down, names nearly swallowed by time. The myth says that the pyramid remembers all of them, that when you speak kindly near its walls, your words echo down to that chamber. And someone long ago smiles. There is one myth no one tells loudly, a story spoken only in hush, and only to those who have stared too long into the silent corridors. It's the tale of the orange shadow that never moves. Some workers said they saw it once, not a ghost, not a man, but a tall shadow always cast on the same wall, even when no one stood before it, even when the torches were out. They said it watched. It waited, and it only appeared to those who were ready to leave this world. But instead of fear, it brought peace. Those who saw it never returned to their old lives. They would wander to the Nile, sit under trees, and simply listen. As if they had heard the last story already, and no longer needed words. The last myth is not one passed down by tongues or stone. It lives only in dreams. It says that the pyramid was not built by hands alone, but by sleep. That each night, thousands of workers fell asleep with the same vision, a golden triangle reaching the sky, shining in sunlight and moonlight, built not for one king, but for the dream of all people who ever hoped for something greater than themselves. They say the pyramid was shaped first in the mind, in silence, in stillness, in sleep. And only then did the body follow. And now you listen. You, far from the desert. Far from the Nile. And yet, The story has reached you. Perhaps you, too, are part of the myth now. Perhaps your breath joins those whispered prayers. Perhaps the dream of the pyramid loves again each time someone lies down and listens softly, slowly. Just like this.